February 1945. High in the jagged ridgelines of the northern Apennines, an American from the 10th Mountain Division crouched behind a jagged spur of stone while icy winds screamed across the peaks like a living thing. The temperature hovered just above death, barely a breath above 0 Fahrenheit. His stomach ached for warmth. He hadn't tasted anything hot in almost 48 hours. The K rations in his pack had turned into bricks, as solid as granite. Every exhale drifted into the air in pale crystals, freezing before fully forming. With hands so numb they felt borrowed, he dug into his gear and pulled out the one tool meant to keep mountain troops alive: the M1942 mountain stove. The supposedly state-of-the-art burner designed specifically for men fighting in environments like this. The Army had insisted it was reliable, rugged, built precisely for these brutal heights. He forced warm breath over his fingertips and unfolded the tiny contraption. He poured gasoline, siphoned from his unit's reserve can, into the miniature fuel tank. Then he began the ritual he'd already memorized. Pump the tank to build pressure. 12 strokes, then 15, then 20. Fill the shallow priming cup with raw fuel. 3/4 full. Ignite it. Let the flame heat the vaporizer tube for half a minute. Then, open the fuel valve. Silence. Not a hiss. Not a flicker. Nothing. The fuel refused to pass through. The vaporizer screen was plugged again. He tried everything, pumped harder, repeated the priming step, coaxed, cursed, breathed on frozen metal. Still nothing. The priming flame guttered out in the wind. The cold bit deeper. Now his fingers barely moved. Starting the process again would be almost impossible. Only 50 yards away, across a barren gap of snow and shattered rock, a German infantryman faced the same cold, the same hunger, the same wind slicing like shards of glass. But his experience was entirely different. The German reached casually into his coat pocket, pulled out a thin metal square, unfolded it twice, set a small white tablet inside, lit a match, and within moments steam curled from his mess tin. No valves, no pumps, no priming, no frustration. 2 minutes. A hot meal. Same mountains. Same temperature. Same need for heat. Completely opposite outcomes. The American soldier could never understand it. The stove he carried was built by respected companies: Coleman, Aladdin, and others renowned for durable outdoor equipment. It had all the hallmarks of advanced engineering: a pressurized system, adjustable flame, vaporizing jets, precision-designed parts tested and approved by Army evaluators. So why did it fail when he needed it most? The truth traced back to a single design choice, small in appearance but massive in consequences. A decision American engineers believed was an improvement, a leap forward, a mark of technological superiority. But once the equipment left clean workshops and entered the filth, fear, freezing air, and exhaustion of real combat, that choice proved disastrous. To understand how the U.S. ended up with such a flawed tool, we must rewind nearly a decade. Back to 1936, back to Germany, back to a seemingly insignificant invention that quietly revolutionized field cooking long before the first American engineer drew a blueprint. In that year, a German businessman named Erich Schumm patented a deceptively simple idea. Not the fuel, hexamine, a compound known since the early 20th century. What Schumm created was a method of compressing this fuel into small, sturdy, reliable tablets that burned with clean, hot flames. No liquid, no spills, no vapor explosions, no moving parts. Just solid chemical blocks that could be lit with a match. He named it Esbit, short for Erich Schumm Brennstoff in Tablettenform, Schumm solid fuel tablets. The design was almost laughably minimalistic: a folding metal stand, a cardboard box of tiny tablets, A flame that burned consistently. That was the entire system. No pumps, no tanks, no valves, no maintenance. Nothing but fire, metal, and reliability. Germany's military saw the advantage instantly. By the outbreak of WWII, mechanized warfare had pushed soldiers far from traditional kitchens. Troops needed heat, mobility, self-sufficiency. The solution fit perfectly in a pocket. Each tablet weighed just a few grams. A box of 20 was barely the size of a deck of cards. The stove folded flat, light enough to forget it existed. Any soldier, infantry, tank crew, dispatch rider, mountain scout could carry days of cooking fuel without noticing the weight. Using it required 3 steps. Unfold, light, heat. It didn't smoke, didn't smell strongly, didn't corrode, didn't freeze, and didn't require a single tool. It survived the Russian winter, the Sahara's heat, the Apennines storms, and France's endless rain. Everywhere German troops went, this tiny stove followed, and it always worked. Most importantly, it demanded almost nothing from the user. Exhausted? Light it. Half frozen? Light it. Under threat? Light it. In darkness? Light it. No instructions needed. No finesse required. No mechanical failures possible. American intelligence knew all this. They had captured these stoves in North Africa and Italy. They tested them. Analysts wrote clear reports describing how German troops managed hot meals under conditions where American troops ate cold rations. The simplicity worked. The evidence was undeniable. So what did the United States decide to do? American engineers examined the problem of feeding soldiers in the field. They recognized the challenge. Distant operations, cold climates, long patrols, high-altitude combat, and the need for hot meals to keep morale alive. They set out to create a superior system, a stove for elite mountain troops. The result was the M1942 mountain stove, based on America's previous pressurized fuel designs. It was compact, rugged, collapsible, crafted from brass and steel. But its fuel system was where American ingenuity went full throttle. Pressurized gasoline, preheating vaporizer, precision jet, adjustable valve, pump-operated pressure system, built-in cleaning needle. On paper, it was impressive. In the lab, it was flawless. At room temperature, it worked beautifully. It even had an advantage over the German stove. More heat output, and the ability to burn the same gasoline used in military vehicles, simplifying supply. But the Army designers made one fatal assumption, that a complex design was inherently superior, that more engineering meant better performance. They never fully tested what would happen when a freezing soldier tried using it on a mountain at midnight with numb hands, wet gloves, and adrenaline-shaken nerves. By early 1945, the truth hit with brutal clarity. Mountain troops discovered the M1942 was not merely unreliable. It was consistently failing. The gasoline used in the field was not clean white gas. It was harsh motor fuel, filled with particulates and additives. Those impurities clogged the tiny vaporizer screen almost immediately. The elaborate delivery system, pride of American engineering, choked on its own sophistication. Soldiers tried to clean the jets using the built-in needle, but doing delicate repairs in freezing wind with stiff fingers was nearly impossible. At temperatures near zero, gasoline vaporized poorly, causing flames to sputter or fail. Leather pump seals hardened to the point where the tank couldn't build pressure. Rubber parts stiffened. Tiny valves froze. Everything that made the stove advanced made it vulnerable. The Germans, by contrast, faced none of these issues. Their system had nothing to clog, nothing to freeze, nothing to break, nothing to adjust. Their process never changed. Take tablet, set tablet, ignite. Eat. American mountain troops saw this firsthand. After capturing German positions, they dug through enemy gear specifically hunting for Esbit stoves, prized treasures among U.S. soldiers. Some traded cigarettes, chocolate, or personal items just to get one. Supply officers sometimes confiscated them, but troops kept them hidden like gold. A direct comparison was painful to witness. Set up M1942. Pump prime heat. Try again. Clean pump again. Wait. Fail. Repeat. Set up captured Esbit. Unfold light done. 3 minutes to boiling water. No frustration. No failure. Soon, the complaints poured in from entire divisions. After action reports. Battalion logs. Letters home. Mountains of evidence. The advanced American stove was failing consistently in the exact environment it was designed for: snow, wind, altitude, cold. Meanwhile, the ridiculously simple German stove worked every single time. Investigators eventually identified the issue. Not something the German stove possessed, but something it deliberately avoided. No pumping mechanism. No pressure system. No vaporizer. No screens. No jets. No seals. No valves. No tools. No moving parts. Nothing that could fail. American engineers saw a simple, robust solution and ignored it, believing complexity was automatically superior. And thousands of freezing soldiers paid for that decision. They had taken a design that functioned flawlessly without a single moving part and burdened it with layers of unnecessary mechanisms. They replaced a tool that practically never needed to be touched with one that demanded constant tinkering. The German method wasn't crude at all. It was refined to its essence. The brilliance of the Esbit system wasn't in what it included, but in what it intentionally left out. Every extra feature American engineers proudly added was simply one more component waiting to break down when men needed it most. The Germans had solved the problems of field cooking by embracing solid fuel blocks, while the American choice, liquid gasoline, brought more complications than advantages. No filters were needed because there were none to clog. No pumps could jam because the design didn't require a pump. No seals could dry out or rupture because the system didn't depend on seals. And when winter storms froze everything, German stoves still ignited because their fuel wasn't liquid. It was already solid, immune to temperature swings. Those compact tablets burned at -60. They burned in scorching heat. They burned after being dropped into a lake and shaken off. They burned in thin mountain air, in sticky mud, in gritty sand, in waist-deep snow. Most importantly, they worked for exhausted soldiers whose fingers barely responded to touch. In battle conditions where stress ruled every minute, no one had time to fiddle with valves, preheating rituals, or complex ignition steps. You needed something that ignited on command, instantly, intuitively, without hesitation. The Germans recognized this fundamental truth. American designers, on the other hand, dismissed such simplicity as primitive, unaware they were discarding the very element that made the system brilliant. The consequences of that mistake didn't reveal themselves in dramatic explosions or sudden mechanical collapse. Instead, they accumulated silently, invisibly, through small losses that chipped away at fighting strength. Whenever an American mountain soldier choked down cold, stiff rations because his stove refused to operate, a little bit of his resolve eroded. His body lost critical warmth that would never return. His endurance slipped, subtly but relentlessly, and every time he knelt in the snow wrestling with a stubborn burner for a quarter of an hour, while a German across the ridge warmed soup in under 2 minutes. That difference became yet another tiny strategic advantage slipping into enemy hands. None of these moments were decisive on their own, but repeated across countless meals, day after day, through entire winter campaigns. They added up to a vast gulf in efficiency and morale. Imagine yourself high in the Apennines, far from the nearest outpost, shivering after a day-long patrol. You haven't tasted anything hot for nearly 2 days. At last you stop for a break. You unpack your issue stove, follow the steps drilled into your memory, pump, prime, ignite, adjust, and again, nothing. The internal screen has blocked up. Frozen fuel stubbornly sits in place, and your numb hands fumble the tiny cleaning tool. You drop it in the snow. You grope for it blindly, unable to feel anything. And even if you recovered it, threading the slender wire through a microscopic hole would be nearly impossible with half-frozen fingers. So once again you eat cold food and stare across the valley at the thin plume of smoke rising from German lines, knowing their simple folding stove never betrays them. That was the daily reality for America's mountain troops and specialized patrol units. A promise of hot meals constantly replaced with irritation, wasted time, and bitter cold. Some American soldiers tried to outsmart the problem, swapping fuels, altering how often they clean parts, lugging extra maintenance gear, even modifying the stoves themselves. None of it mattered. The flaw wasn't the fuel, the materials, or the craftsmanship. The flaw was the philosophy behind the design. The American stove was simply too complicated to survive the brutality of field life. Meanwhile, soldiers who managed to capture Esbit stoves discovered a truth so obvious it felt like irony. The simplest tool was also the most dependable. A device created for the rough reality of combat beat one designed around laboratory theory every time. By the end of the war, the evidence could not be ignored. The American stove hadn't failed because workers built it poorly. It failed because it was conceived from the wrong mindset. Engineers had chosen complexity in a situation that demanded nothing but reliability. They had mocked the German solution as too unsophisticated to take seriously, never realizing its elegance lay in its refusal to break. Only after the conflict ended did the lesson finally take root. Solid hexamine fuel blocks were adopted into U.S. rations. British troops issued Tommy cookers. NATO armies standardized solid fuel heating systems for individual soldiers. To this day, military rations across the world include versions of the same fuel tablets the Germans perfected long before the war reached its midpoint. And remarkably, the folding metal stove seen in modern field kits remains nearly identical to the 1936 Esbit design, preserved because it simply worked and never required improvement. Thousands of frostbitten soldiers sitting in icy trenches taught that lesson far more effectively than any engineering report ever could. The American team missed nothing obscure or hidden. The secret wasn't in complicated blueprints or advanced chemistry. It was sitting in plain view, small white tablets that burned cleanly without relying on pumps, filters, seals, or moving mechanisms. A tiny block of fuel that did one job flawlessly: ignite when touched by flame. The brilliance of the Esbit stove was not in clever engineering tricks, but in its deliberate avoidance of them. Resisting unnecessary innovation is a form of engineering genius on its own. Knowing what not to include can matter more than what you build. The Germans embraced this idea early on. They tested alternatives: liquid fuels, intricate burners, multi-part mechanisms, and rejected them because soldiers in the field needed certainty, not sophistication. American designers assumed more engineering automatically meant better performance, and that assumption cost their troops dearly. In warmth, in comfort, in physical resilience, and in time wasted fighting equipment rather than the enemy. The M1942 stove remains a stark warning. Complexity without purpose becomes a liability. Simplicity, when informed by real-world conditions, becomes strength. German soldiers trusted their Esbit stoves because they had earned that trust every single time they were used. American troops learned to distrust theirs for the same reason, because their stoves failed them repeatedly in the moments that mattered most. In the end, the overlooked detail wasn't something minor. It was foundational. Understanding that the system they tried to improve didn't need improvement at all. It needed replication. Solid fuel tablets in a folding metal frame. That was the entire genius. It was what American soldiers needed, what German soldiers had, and what American engineers only understood after the fact. If deep explorations like this into wartime engineering failures and battlefield realities intrigue you, make sure to like and subscribe, because next time we're diving into another forgotten tool that shaped how soldiers endured the harshest conditions imaginable.